And she's like, well, here's a picture of the CEO. I was like, okay, cool. And I went up and I sat in his lobby for like 4 hours.
Oh,
and
wow.
I waited for him to show up. And I was like, hey, can I talk to you? When he came walking in, I was like, he's like, who are you? What do you want? I worked at a place. It's no longer, I guess I can say because it's no longer there. I worked at a place called Gart Brothers. And I did that just so I could get cheap ski stuff.
Nice. I mean, you got to do what you got to do,
Other
right?
than that, I have literally, since I was a kid, I've always worked for myself. I love seeing from day one when somebody comes into our program to the person that walks out the other end of it. They're excited to be a parent. They're excited to go out and get a job. They're excited to move on with their life. You know, if that's the outcome, all the headache is worthwhile.
Hello, and welcome to Good Job New Mexico. I'm Stacy Johnston.
And I'm Leo Castaneda.
And on today's episode, we're talking to Marc Schmallen. He is the CEO and founder of Choice Recovery Path. So Marc's story is really interesting, and somebody who's determined and just kept on going, even though it was like maybe really tough times, but he didn't take no for an answer and he just kept on pushing through it. And now he's got this amazing foundation that he's created and helping individuals and getting people placed back into work and providing opportunities to them and that maybe they didn't know were available. So just all really good stuff.
Yeah, it was such an interesting conversation because he has a very non-traditional path to his current career. But I think there's something that everyone can take away from the fact that he constantly was like, oh, a new opportunity to keep growing this new career that he was developing around recovery. And he was like, yeah, I can do that. And then, you know, as people will hear, he sort of figured it out. But I think there's something so valuable for everyone who is starting a career, changing career, in their career. And it's just like facing these things where you're like, I don't know how to do this. I think he's a great model of like, you can just do it. And then,
Just do it.
And then figure it out.
For sure. And I love that he had like a Post-it system or something in his car.
Yeah.
But he just made it work. And I also really liked that it was somebody just randomly suggesting, hey, you should do this. And he thought, okay. And he just went out and did it.
Yeah. The system that works is the system that works for you. That many Post-its, that stressed me out.
Yeah, did it?
A little bit.
I don't know. I've got like all kinds of Post-its all over the place that I'm like, remember that one Post-it like 10 months ago? I'm sure it's around here somewhere. So yeah, I probably need to develop a system for that.
Yeah. And then, you know, but if it works, it works. And then once you need a more complicated one.
Oh, I think what I'm trying to say is that my system is not working.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please write in with your suggestions for no organizing systems for Stacy.
But please enjoy this episode with Marc. And without further ado, here he is. Are you a resident of New Mexico?
I am.
Born and raised in Albuquerque? Or?
No, well, I'm a replant of New Mexico. I grew up in Colorado originally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I ended up in New Mexico, kind of an accident about 14 years ago, somewhere in between there.
Tell us about you growing up.
Yeah, growing up, I grew up in Colorado, which is very similar to New Mexico in a lot of ways. Rural Colorado, small little prison town down south. There was only 30,000 people in the whole town. Then like every other teenager, wanted to get out of there as fast as humanly possible when you graduated high school, went up to Fort Collins and then was there for 12 years or so and then ended up in Vail for a while and then Aspen and then down to Albuquerque in the streets of Albuquerque.
So are you an avid skier?
I used to actually be a ski instructor a long time ago. Yeah, so it started just because I was... No, it's just I was part of 4-H program. Then they had lessons and eventually I started so young that I got to the place where like, there is no other lessons left. You just want to teach. And I was like, sure, that'd be great. And I was like 15 or 16.
Oh, nice. Was that one of your first jobs?
It was really close to it. Yeah. I've always worked for myself with the exception of that.
Okay. So the only time you had a boss, were they nice?
I worked at a place, it's no longer, I guess I could say because it's no longer there. I worked at a place called Gart Brothers, turned into Big Five Sports or something. And I did that just so I could get cheap ski stuff.
Nice. I mean, you got to do what you got to do,
other
right?
than that, I have literally, since I was a kid, I've always worked for myself.
That's amazing.
My entire life. Yeah, down here in a very different aspect of my life, as it were, before starting an organization.
Yeah, which I want to dive into how you start an organization. That's really interesting, but we want to hear more if you want to share.
Yeah, for sure. I'm an open book to everybody. So I am somebody who's in long-term recovery from addiction. When I came to New Mexico, I was very much not in recovery from addiction. Long story short, I ended up spending about 35 years of my life in drug use. It started when I was about 9 and then used till I was like 44. basically. And the very tail end of it, I spent about 3.5 years on the streets of Albuquerque, like everybody else you see walking around this town with a backpack. Then I ended up, kind of finding my way through that. Ended up just helping other people do what I did. And there was no intention of an organization at that stage. I just was like, well, if it worked for me, why can't it work for other people? As you travel around New Mexico or anywhere else in this country, you'll see a lot of, with people with homelessness or any of the struggles that are going on here. But I think most people definitely don't like the way they are, but they don't know what to do next. And so they don't, when they start looking out, everybody that they know is like me, there's a very generational aspect to addiction. A lot of people have just never seen anything differently. So when you're looking out into a dark black void like that, you don't know what else to do.
Makes it hard to envision a different way.
Yeah, when you've never seen anything different, or you didn't even realize that change is possible. Like I had a mom who was a social worker, so I at least knew there was another way of living. Just through a lot of own personal struggles, didn't. When I was first doing this here, I was working with some just individuals. They were like, I know my life sucks, but I don't know what to do. And I think there's a lot lost in between their experience and what people expect of them. If I was to come to either of you who are very highly productive, smart, capable people, and I asked you essentially to, get rid of all of your friends, get rid of the way you deal with your problems, get rid of the way you handle your emotions, get rid of every aspect of problem solving you've ever known. And by the way, if you're in the legal system, you better do that perfectly or I'm going to throw you in jail. How successful do you think you'd be, honestly? And so in a lot of times when you ask somebody to change, that's what you're asking them. To get rid of all of their known operating systems and do something new and different and, do it perfectly. And it's hard, it's daunting. Yeah. And so I just started helping other people do what I did. And at first I was like, oh, show people what to do. I was like, that's the stupidest idea you've ever had. Clearly somebody's doing that. Everyone wants people who are struggling to change. But the more I looked, there wasn't a lot of people who were just very, very basically showing people how to do that. In an easy, understandable way that really gave resources and options and helped people have buy-in for their own future. So it wasn't just, oh, you need to go do this. And they're like, well, why? Why do I want to do that? The whole organization, of which we have about 70 people that work for us now, was an accident. There was no idea of starting a program or an organization.
Just kind of snowballed.
Yeah. Well, I was just like, the things I did work for me. Why can't it work for other people? So I started working with people that were in the legal system, the two of the biggest problems in New Mexico are addiction and crime, as everybody knows. And it's no mystery to anybody. But they walk hand in hand. So I started looking at the realities of, most people in New Mexico who end up in the legal system are not there because they're criminals. Now, mind you, they may have done a crime, but they did a crime in service of an addiction. So, but what's behind that addiction is a lot of pain of some version or another. And so, but society has told us for a long period of time that, oh, just don't do it. Just stop. Make a better decision. Make a better choice.
Right, because we think about that endpoint in that moment, but there's so much that led to that, right? There's so many decisions and history and actions that led up to someone making that decision. So just saying make a different decision kind of ignores
the prehistory to it.
The prior path that got to that point.
For sure. Using for most people, when I say using, I mean drinking or using drugs, is an attempt at a solution. It's never looked at as the problem. Now, over time, that solution doesn't work, but people keep doing it. I've asked this question, no exaggeration, 10,000 times to the clients that are on our program that we work with. And I'll say, what does using do for you, or what does it give you? And I don't mean to get high or to get drunk. That's an effect. But what does it do for you? And the answers are always the same. To deal with depression, to deal with anxiety, to deal with loneliness, to deal with shame, to deal with loss, to deal with guilt, to deal with abuse, to deal with trauma, to deal with PTSD, to deal with any emotional struggle, or to feel connection, or to feel good. I mean, I've been depressed at times. Yeah. I've been lonely at times. I've had shame at times. Now, maybe not to the extent of other people, but that's part of the human condition because those aren't addict problems. Those are human problems. And so we spend a lot of time kind of reframing how people see themselves. Because if you can change the way you see yourself, then you can change the way you can see your experience, and you can detach who I was from what I want to be.
How did you personally get started? Because it seems like when you look at all of that, it feels like this huge mound that you need to get over.
Yeah.
Where did you find where to start?
Where did mine start? Okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, I ended up in the legal system, like a lot of people. And over time, consequences are what they are, and it kind of opens up your eyes to things. I went from living in Aspen, Colorado. I mean, Aspen, it's rivers and beautifulness and a bunch of rich people, running a construction company and a property management company. But, so caught up in that lifestyle, I ended up coming here for a week a long time ago. I always joke about it this way. I'm like, the governor liked me so much, she insisted I not leave the state, which is kind of a joke. But I ended up with a probation. But in that, I'd separated, the life I was living from the one I wanted to live. When I was started to see that, and I got involved in a 12-step fellowship, and not to get into that, but other people would come up there and say, hey, how'd you do that? How'd you do all the things you've done? And now there's a longer, more impactful story to this that I would share when I would, there's a part of a 12-step fellowship where they ask you to go share your experience with other people so they can see hope and possibility through your eyes. And I would go do that where it'd be in a jail or a treatment center or somewhere like that. And I would share the story, and somebody would always come up to me afterwards and be like, hey, can I talk to you? I'm like, what's up? He's like, how'd you do all that stuff with the courts? And I started to see that you could use your time in the legal system as a springboard to change and a springboard to a life in recovery. And so I just started showing people what I did. Then somebody in McKinley County Detention Center was like, hey, we have a 28-day program for guys in here. Would you come talk to them? And I was like, sure. And then somebody at a treatment center, will you come do that? And I was like, sure. And then somebody was like, hey, you can do this more on a bigger scale. And I was like, I didn't even know that was a possibility because I was just doing construction. I would take all the money and I'd give everything away. And I just started making these tools that people use that were, I'm not a therapist. I wasn't trying to be. I was just speaking from a lived experience of what mattered. But it was so impactful to the people that we worked with because they started to see that change was possible. I don't know if you guys live here in Albuquerque, but as you drive around town, you see it everywhere. You see just everybody. Especially recently, there's just been so much struggle, and how do you make change when that's the starting line? I've heard the average literacy rate for a lot of people in the state of New Mexico is 4th grade. So what do you do when, cultural stigma or, poverty or, behavior modeled by people in a healthy way you've never seen? Like, how do you start when you've never seen any of this differently? So that's kind of how the organization started. And then it turned into, over time, working with different treatment centers around the state and then starting our own thing. And then it works so well. Some of the treatment centers or organizations are like, hey, this works awesome. Our staff love it. Can you train them how to do what you do? And I was like, sure.
And what I think is so interesting from your story, from what you're sharing is, you were a contractor, you had a business, like it, I think sometimes we forget that having those skills is not something someone can be professionally successful or doing well professionally and still struggle with the issues that might lead them down the path of addiction, of struggling with the legal system. And I think it's so important as we're talking about workforce, and a lot of times we talk about getting people employed, but also giving people who are employed the tools to address these issues that might drive them out of being able to keep a job, keep their business going.
Yeah. When I first met with some of the program coordinators through TANF, was one of the organizations, she was just like, hey, will you come down, meet me at the office on Mountain? And I'd like to talk to you about being a referral source. And I was like, sure, no problem. And I came down and I walked through the lobby and I'm like, oh, it's just like our lobby. And I was like, what are you doing to help people with the reasons they walk through the doors to begin with? And they were like, well, we help them get jobs and gain employment. I'm like, that's awesome. That's great. But if we haven't dealt with the reasons they came here to begin with, how long are they going to be able to keep and maintain that job or maintain that employment? And so I was like, what are the struggles they've had? And it was the same exact things. In that program, we started working with them a little bit. I am a deep believer in collaborative relationships between organizations in New Mexico because none of us can do everything for everybody. If they could come and work on becoming a better version of themselves, would you consider that work readiness? And I absolutely would. So people can come through and really start to see that change is possible and they can start to get out. I remember when I was talking to Doña Ana County, which is Las Cruces, their HHS department, and they told me that it costs that community between $9,000 and $14,000 per month per individual that remains on the streets using substances. Think about every person you see walking the streets here. Now, mind you, that was 7 years ago. Yeah. And so inflation being what it has been over the last few years, you could probably make that about 20% higher than what it was then. Imagine just like how many people did you see driving into work today?
Quite a few.
10, 20, 30 people on your way here. Now think about just on your one drive to work. Let's just imagine you had 20%. Let's just say it's $15,000 a month per individual. And what that consists of that number is, 911 calls and ambulance visits and hospital stays and judicial involvement and incarceration and just every service that surrounds somebody that's out on the street. Then I was talking with somebody in probation and parole. If you want to think about simple math of how much this costs this state, at that same time, I asked somebody who was in charge of probation and parole, how many people are in that system, in the correction system, and they said 42,000. Imagine if those people were back on the streets with no help, and they cost each one of them costs this community $15,000 a month. It is in the hundreds of millions of dollars so quickly. And what I want to do as an organization has changed that.
And it's so demoralizing, right? For everyone involved, for the healthcare workers, for the staff that are trying to help them, and for them, because it's not like they're getting $15,000 and they're spending, it's just cost of things, having to go to the hospital because, and it's awful for everyone.
It's mind-boggling when you think how much that costs the state, just financially. I'm not trying to just make it about the financial reality of it, but, if these statistics have been consistent, I mean, not just in New Mexico, but across the state, how do we actually change that? And so that's kind of the goal of our organization is to really make a dent in those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the way we are now with social media influencers and whoever. If you see somebody and you can relate at any point of their story, you're more likely to pay more attention to what they're saying. So I love that was part of your journey, is telling other people. And through that, they found help and understanding of how to make their change in their life. Now that you've done all of that, I'm going to take us back a little bit. Yeah. And people are saying, you can make this a career. How did you make that jump point?
The first lady who actually helped me come in, I was just doing this as a volunteer thing just to help. She ran the McKinley County Detention Center back in the day. And I was doing this and helping the guys, and they loved it. And, because I'm just me, I just come in. I'm not trying to be anything I'm not. And I would talk to them and kind of cuss. And I talk with them about their perspective. And she's like, you should go up and talk to the treatment center. So at the time, the largest treatment center at the state was a place in Gallup, and they had 69 beds, or it was one of the bigger ones. And she was like, I used to work there. And I'm like, do you think they'd like this? Because I had created a big thing called a progress board. It was just kind of like a vision board for what you wanted to do, because I was trying to overcome literacy for most people. And she's like, well, here's a picture of the CEO. I was like, okay, cool. And I went up and I sat in his lobby for like 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
And I waited for him to show up. And I was like, hey, can I talk to you? When he came walking in, I was like, he's like, who are you? What do you want? I mean, I'm 6'9", so when I come walking in, I kind of freak people out. But I went in and talked to him and said, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I think I might have something that might help the participants in your program. He's like, okay, come in. He let me come into his office. He was super cool about it. He was like, this is actually really cool. He wouldn't pay me, but he would buy the materials that we had, and which was great. And so I marked him up a little bit, but it let me come in, and I started doing programming in there. And so we did one, and I had their staff come in and like, this is awesome. Will you guys come back next month to do it again? And I was like, really? Sure, I'd love to. And I was driving home from Gallup, and I got about to Grants, and it dawned on me that it was a 90-day program. And so I was like, oh, I can't do the same thing. The same people are going to be there. I can't do it over again. They're going to be bored out of their mind. And so I started thinking about what were how do you scratch your own itch? If you're going to start an organization, how can you start with a use case of one and scratch your own itch, essentially? I started taking things that I struggled with, or I saw other people struggle with, but nobody talked about. They definitely didn't talk about in a language that I understood. So I started writing these down, and I literally would draw them out on a piece of paper with a pencil, and I'd go to FedEx or somewhere, and I'd photocopy 69 copies of them, put them together, and I called it a toolkit. And I started facilitating groups that way. But the clients loved it. And I did that, and they were like, this is awesome. Will you come back, do it every 2 weeks? And I was like, sure.
Yeah.
And then I kept coming back every 2 weeks. So I'd rush home and I'd make a bunch of new tools, and I'd come back. And I was walking around with these giant boxes of photocopies because I didn't know what I was doing. And this one client was like, hey, dude, why don't you just write a book? I can make a book. I had no idea how to make a book, but I was like, I'll figure it out. And so we just started doing that. And so I made some books, and the hospital started buying books. And then they asked, can you train people? And I was like, sure. I never envisioned the day I wouldn't be there to share the idea, but a bunch of other programs wanted to use this. So we wrote a bunch of facilitators guides to help train and how people how they can continue. And so that's what the program was for a long while. There was a couple of us. There was only the first girl that worked for me, actually, she only made $10 an hour. And I said, you can only work 4 hours at a time, and I have to pay you, because I was really concerned. She'd want me like a couple $100s that I didn't have. Started with literally nothing, but it kept growing. And then I had the idea, because this progress board is really big. It's like a big 20 by 24 poster board. And I was like, that's cool, but you can't carry it around with you. And I was like, what if we had software? I was like, what if we turn that into an app? And I was like, sure, we can make an app. I have no idea how to code. None. We saw a need, and so we filled it. And so I got some investment from somebody, and we actually built an app. It took about 3 years. But we built an app, we started doing publishing, and then we got into, instead of working with other people in their program, started our own program. So we became a behavioral health provider and got credentialed with the state, and then went into medical care. And none of it was a foregone plan. It literally started. So if anybody's out there trying to figure out how do you start a program or how do you start your own thing, I would really think about how do you solve your own problem? Because I only did addiction because that's what I know. But I know that I wasn't unique in any of these things.
But what is so impressive is that you always said yes. You said, new challenge? Yeah, I can do that. And then you figure out how to do it. But
yeah, I mean,
you
like
take on the
nobody's going to go,
challenge.
hey, let's go learn HIPAA compliance. I didn't know anything about HIPAA compliance. We actually got our software was patented.
Amazing.
Yeah, copyright law, compliance law, like state procurement, any of this stuff.
Have you ever had a speaking engagement request that surprised you?
I got super lucky that when I started this, there was a small program. So we've been pretty successful now. And a lot of people either didn't know or didn't see that for the first few years, they're like, no, not for us, not for us. My idea was if I don't ever get all in on what we're doing, I'm never going to know if it works. If I'm constantly using something else as a crutch to get by. And so I sold every single tool I had and forced my hand to really give this its best. And I committed to living on literally rice and beans for a long time. And I'm like, I'm going to try this for 6 months and either it's going to work. If not, I'll just go back to construction. Well, 9 years later, we're still here. And now we have almost 70 people that work for us. And we have employees in 5 states. And yeah, I couldn't have anticipated it. But there does come a time where you've got to kind of push all in on what you're doing.
Was there a time when you were getting all of those no's that you had any type of a doubt or?
Oh, question. Is it hard? Yeah, I'll be honest. There's to this day, I'll pull up to a new organization to go talk to somebody, and what goes through my head when I first do it? Why are you going in here? They don't want to hear what you have to say. They don't want to hear. I mean, it's been hugely successful ever since, but there is still that little voice in my head that's like, why are you even bothered? They don't need to hear what you hear. That I don't know if it's FOMO, but
that little doubt.
That little doubt, the imposter syndrome idea, that was a little bit of a struggle.
I was going to say, what's next for you? What do you see for the future of the organization, for yourself?
What's next? That's a great question. I'm almost apprehensive to say. So we've kind of focused on, we for a while we did a lot of different things. We had a mobile crisis team. We had a bunch of different things. And we've really kind of narrowed our focus into what we do really well and tried to become the gold standard of what that looks like for us. And so there's been a huge learning curve to being a CEO. There's no book on that, on how to do it or how to empower. So I've tried to make a bunch of everything not Marc dependent in our organizations. Our staff tells me a lot. You've hired really smart people, let them be smart. And so what I've tried to do is just get out of the way and let people do what they do. For me, starting to talk to people more nationally. Like I was on a meet with a program in Maine earlier. I'm meeting with some people in Virginia tomorrow. There's some different programs around what we do is applicable to any community in America. And so trying to give kind of a platform for people to be able to take what we have and help people in their community is really what's next. So what that looks like, I don't know, to be determined.
All right. Well, we'll stick around to see what's next.
Yeah.
We're going to be following your story.
Yeah.
Just curious. I mean, you mentioned being a CEO. When was the first moment where you grown this and you realize like, oh, this isn't just me going in and sort of cold calling places, but now I'm a CEO. I have a entire organization and multiple staff and people can do things without me. And
when did I realize that?
Yeah.
When we had an HR department, when we had when we had to look at, medical care, when we started looking at, when we actually had to look at the hard part is how do you compete with the big the state
right.
or the county or, the big organizations of Blue Cross or UNM? How are we competitive in our, when we're drawing from the same pool of resources from people?
Yeah.
Looking at payroll structures and looking at HR and looking at, medical, how do we provide medical care for people and retirement plans and all of those pieces. It's a very isolating job in a lot of ways. Basically I end up being kind of the repository for every crappy problem that nobody else can solve. That's kind of what it comes down to. But we have an amazing group of people. And my biggest curve has learned how to work on our organization instead of in it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. It's,
and it's like, I wish there was a book, the 9 things you need to know to be a CEO or the 150 things you need to know to be a CEO. But there's kind of not. It's a lot of trial by fire.
I think that's your next book.
I was just going to say,
that's the next one.
Yeah. I just spend a lot of time trying to learn from people and associate. I spend a lot of time online, you are who you spend your time with. So I guess I can't hang out with a lot of people like that, but I can see the things they do, and I can read the books they have, and I can watch the videos and the things they have and try to incorporate some learnings to what we do. But at the end of the day, to stay really focused on the clients we serve. That's what I want, because I don't ever want to lose sight of that, and then all the decisions we make are in service of helping people live a life they can be madly in love with.
Okay, so rapid, not so rapid question. Do you work from home or in the office?
Yes.
All
So
the time?
we have 15,000 square feet of office space, and I still work from my car most days.
Okay.
I give up. So client service comes first. So I used to have I've had offices, but I always end up giving them up so people can actually work with the clients. I either work from home or do digital. I'm out in the world more than anything. I'm kind of our chief evangelist. That's generally what I'm doing.
Since you're out on the road so much, and this is a me thing. Favorite gas stations?
Favorite gas stations? Well, I bought an electric car a couple of years ago, so I don't have to stop at gas stations anymore. When I was first doing this, I was doing about 120,000 miles a year, driving to literally any corner of the state where somebody would be willing to have a conversation.
That's
in this little tiny Camry. But favorite gas station?
And I say this because I will risk running out of gas if there's an all subs.
So yeah, I know all subs that are, they're in every far-flung corner of the state. But yeah, I like all subs. I mean, I don't stop at a lot of gas stations as much anymore. I mean, maybe that's
probably for the best if you're on the road.
Well, I mean, yeah, those little burritos are awesome.
Yeah.
But as you get, be 54 here in a couple of weeks, and it takes a lot more effort to stay in shape the older you get. And so,
What's your favorite part of your job?
watching the light turn on and somebody watching them change. I love seeing from day one when somebody comes into our program to the person that walks out the other end of it. That's, that came in with no hope, no possibility, no anything, and they walk out and they're excited to be a parent. They're excited to go out and get a job. They're excited to move on with their life. I saw a couple who we highly discourage dating in our program, but obviously it happens. There's a couple that ended up together, and they had a kiddo, and I saw them the other day, and they were holding this little 9-month-old little girl, and they're doing great. And if that's the outcome, all the headache is worthwhile, for sure.
If you could have a superpower.
Any superpower?
Any superpower.
I've heard this where it's like a mediocre superpower.
Right.
But
No.
a teleportation.
If you're logging 120,000
I spend
miles.
so much time traveling.
Yeah.
Do you have a messy desk or a clean desk?
I don't even have a desk.
I was going to say, is there a desk?
Well, it's funny. My dashboard used to be just nothing but sticky notes. I met my business partner. He got in my car. He's like, "What is all this? Are you a serial killer?" Usually it's my car. I do more from the front seat of my car as I'm traveling around. If I had to lean to one side or the other, messy would probably be definitely more. I know I have a formula. I have a system, but nobody else would understand the system but me.
We're doing a movie about your life. Who do you want us to get to play you?
I don't know. I guess I'd have to be tall.
It's movie magic. We can make it work.
Movie magic. Somebody be tall. If somebody was to play me in a movie, I kind of like Morgan Freeman, but
That'd be great.
What's your number one work habit?
You're going to laugh when you hear this come out of my mouth, but it's usually to be on time. I really, in my past life when I was never on time. And so I really try to focus on that. It, like today, bothered me a lot when I was a few minutes late for this.
Last question. Red or green?
Red or green? Green.
I know. See,
Okay.
foreshadowing.
Green.
Thank you so much for your time and
Yeah,
for sharing
my
your story
pleasure,
with
guys.
us.
you.
I really
Appreciate
appreciate this. And I love what you guys are doing. Thank you so much. And thanks for everybody who's listening for the way you serve New Mexicans. It's awesome.
This has been a New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions production. Our producer is Milo Koleski. This episode was engineered and mixed by John Sloan. Theme music is One Fine Day, courtesy of podcast.co. Follow the show on social media at GoodJobNM. For program funding, visit our website, dws.state.nm.us/funding. Bye.